Welcome everyone back to my channel. If you're new, my name is Monica. I am a tarot reader and astrologer based in Australia. And in this video, I am exploring the Death card in the tarot. The first part of the video is I go through different visual images of the Death card from my deck collection. I'll be going through my insights into this card and its meanings, and later on in the video I'll be talking about some of my personal experiences with this card, but also some of my experiences as a reader as well. So the reason I'm doing this is because I am now in a personal death tarot card year, meaning that when my birthday took place in December, if I add the numbers of my day of birth, my month of birth, and the year 2022, and reduce those to a number from the major arcana, I obtain number 13, and that is the Death card. Now, personally, I have been absolutely fascinated and amazed how the card meaning and symbolism translates over to my personal life and my life events for the duration of the year as I work through these different personal year cards. So, for example, back in 2011, when I was in a Wheel of Fortune year, I traveled from New Zealand to Romania to spend 3 months with my grandmother there. Then from Romania, I traveled back to New Zealand. Then I packed my bags and moved permanently to Australia. So the Wheel of Fortune for me presided over huge travel. All right, it's not just travel within my neighborhood, it was big overseas travel, and that is one of the meanings of the Wheel of Fortune. It is related to travel and broadening one's horizons, but also to huge sweeping changes in your life, and certainly they were for me. So that's just one example. But let's get back to the Death card. So I want to start off by saying that very often we see a common keyword associated with the Death card, as shown here in this card, is that of transformation. And I do agree, it is inherent in the process of dying that something is changed, a transition happens, and a transformation takes place. Death can indeed bring renewal, and here is another card depicting that. It's also about new starts. The rebirth in this image reminds us of the phoenix that rises from the ashes. Interestingly, the artist of the deck states that this card depicts the passage from the age of Pisces, or antagonisms, to the age of Aquarius, or holistic vision. I can't help but think of the past few years and what a tremendous and painful collective death experience we've all had collectively as part of this epic transition as we're going through in the age of Aquarius. Okay, so I think it's important to recognize that and acknowledge that death is a rebirth, but it's not an easy one, right? We've got fire and we've got ashes with this phoenix rising. It's not just something that happens easily, or there's often a tremendous amount of pain with the Death card when it's involved. Death can also be the death of the ego, a painful crisis that can bring about wisdom, maturation, insights, and ultimately healing, and a more compassionate worldview that is not so self-centered. That realization that is not all about you, that in a way you are irrelevant, that life will go on whether you are a part of it or not. But this is also so freeing, right? So the Death card does bring about huge changes. And I love this depiction of it, this lady here cutting her hair, and you can see the outline of the skeleton, right? So we've got the idea that you know, the core stays, what our foundation, what underpins us, the solid skeleton, you know, our core remains. So it's really important to have a really good core, if that makes sense. I'm not trying to bring about a yoga class message in here, but that's what really strikes me about the scar. You know, it's like your inner self is so important. Yeah, you know, everything else can change as we go through these transitions, but your inner core, what anchors you in this life, to help you deal with vast sweeping changes. One of my favorite cards is this one here that shows the passage, highlighting the transition and the change that is irreversible. And I think it's a beautiful depiction, even though it's black and white. There's a little bit of just a touch of color in these flowers, but not too much really. There's a mood that's somber, and yet peaceful at the same time. Now, the last time that I was in a death year, because it has happened for me before, was about 9 years ago. My husband's father passed away. So this indeed did bring an actual physical death in my immediate family. But it also, with that, brought huge changes for us, because we ended up moving into the house that my husband's father built out on acreage, and it was a really significant life event for us, and for me personally. It was really where, like, I always thought I'd end up out in nature somewhere. I just never knew how that would happen. But in any case, that's a personal experience for me with the death card. And it was by no means easy. I mean, aside from the personal pain and sorrow that needs to be experienced and processed, and yeah, you just need to go through that. It was also difficult, like the whole move in itself, not knowing how we're going to go about and make it work for us to live in that house, and it needed so much work to be done to it. So yes, that was a bit of a tricky time as well, but that was in a way minor compared to the pain that my husband felt about losing his father. They were quite close, and so yeah, it put a shadow over that year for us, and especially for my husband. The other story I would like to mention is when I was, it was around the end of the year in 2019, and I had been at the same job for about 8 years in local government, and there are many reasons why I stayed in it. Parts of it were fulfilling, parts of it were stressful, parts of it were demoralizing, parts of it were inspiring. So I was working in the environmental part of council, so there were lots of good things about it. But anyway, I, as most readers do, I was doing some tarot spreads. I remember doing them related to my work, and the outcome card was always the death card. This happened on more than one occasion. Like, this happened once, twice, 3 times, and so on. And I kept thinking, oh, it's a transition, you know, there'll be some sort of restructure, and you know, it'll be the end of the way that my team is as it is, and all these sort of things. Like, I wasn't really looking at the cards objectively. I was looking at them very, very subjectively, and the tarot has a habit of really teaching us some painful lessons when you do that. Because what happened is, actually, my manager quit, and I knew when that happened that my department wouldn't be the same, because he had been a huge driver in the way certain things were manifested, and some of the projects that we were doing that were pretty cool. And yeah, I had been around long enough to know that it was really the end. And so I think it was about a month later or 2 months later that I actually quit. And so it was the end of that worked for me after 8 years. So when we talk about death, we talk about really big, significant endings. It's not something minor. Okay, it's not. I mean, it might be you cutting your hair like in the previous photo, but I think it's much more than that when the death card appears. Finally, I want to share a story when I was reading for someone. This is back in my very, very early days. I was doing readings. If people would ask me, I guess impromptu, I always had a pack of cards with me. I still do. And at the time I was working at a bookshop. It was just, a job to support me while I was at university. And I like books, and bookshops really fit me really well for work. So anyway, there I was, and I was very good friends with another young lady that was working there with me. And she asked me to give her a reading or something along those lines. So I pulled the cards out, and it was a really quiet time in the bookshop. So we were both actually behind the counter. There was no one around from memory. Like, it was super quiet, of course. And she got the death card from him. I know for a fact she got the death card. I can't remember whether I did a horseshoe spread or a 3-card spread. But anyway, the death card rolled up. And I said I brushed it off, basically. I didn't take it seriously like a physical death, because I could feel her horror upon seeing this card, right? I could really, really tell that she was, it impacted her. And so I said, oh, look, don't worry. It hardly ever means a physical death. Got nothing to worry about. It's, likely that something is coming to an end in your life, like a project, or maybe, I remember just really not treating it or giving it serious thought. And I, from memory, went away for lunch, and I came back and she had gone, because she received a phone call to say that her grandmother had passed away, and she was close to her grandmother. So that taught me a really, really important lesson very early on. For some reason, I seem to learn my lessons like the really hard way. Because I would have certainly, if I'd known for sure, or if I would have taken the reading with a bit more gravity, I perhaps could have started that process of gently acknowledging that could be a possibility, and preparing the person for, that being a possibility, because we never really know ultimately. And I actually see this a lot. I've seen lots and lots of videos where people in the tarot community will talk about the death card, and they'll just focus on that idea of transformation, transition, letting go, release, detachment, and all those things, which are true. I'm not saying they're not true. Of course they're true. But we've got to talk about the fact that death can also mean an actual death of a person. And it can very well be someone that we love. And that one day we too will pass away from this life. And, what do we leave behind? That's really, really important to think about, right? Really give it some thought. Because we all add a bit of energy into this great karmic, cosmic cycle that keeps repeating. And I have this thing that I think that when we die, our energy, our fears, or our joys, our love, our compassion, or our hate, they sort of get, that energy gets cycled back in. And so I think it's really important to practice a good heart and compassion and things like that, and to not give in to fear and darkness and all those sort of things, and ultimately realize that death is a cycle of life. And yes, things are reborn and there is transition, but it is a painful one when someone that you know and love dies. I would like to complete this journey now with a reading from a beautiful deck called Songs from the Journey Home. The Death card does symbolize endings and beginnings. However, until we acknowledge actual death, then we are unable to see clearly that we are constantly surrounded by the subtleties of conception, birth, life, death, and rebirth. The acknowledgement of death does not mean we understand it, but if we live daily with the knowledge that death will occur, then we move from the terror of the unknown towards befriending the mystery. When actual death is recognized, our life choices become richer and fuller. We allow ourselves to flower abundantly. We move away from petty restrictions and guidelines. It is vital we use every opportunity in life to move fully into letting go, consciously and meditatively examining our responses to the passing of all things, simple daily changes and disruptions. The Western television culture is utterly pervaded with images of the grossness of death. Perhaps this is representative of a culture's inability to see death as anything but a violation, an indignity, an insult. It remains a relatively rare occurrence for films to depict people who are in harmony with their final hours, people who let go into peace rather than having death leap forcefully and unexpectedly at them. Forgiveness plays a major part in allowing us to die to a past we may wish was different, more this, more that. To carry the burden of unresolved griefs is to live a life of suffocating limitations. To forgive ourselves is to die to the chains of suffering. Unless we know how to die to the past with full gratitude for all we have learned and for those we have loved, how can we expect the fragile bud of rebirth to emerge within us? When something is ending, simultaneously, something is being born. We need to move with great sensitivity and awareness. Otherwise, dying to the past becomes an act of violence, and that which is new will not even be recognized. How we die and how we live are less than a breath apart. Thank you for watching.